Welcome back to another Value Bite. We have Amber Gray on today, which I'm really excited to dive in. Amber has been on a true journey as a business owner. So we're going to get to hear a little bit about that, about her transition, her exit, and then obviously dive into her expertise. And so I know if you're a CEO, if you're an owner, delegation, and making sure that you're making the business, working on the business and not in your business, it can be so challenging. So maybe walk away with some insight about how you can pull some delegation tips and insights into your everyday. And then we get to hear about Amber's new book. So I'm very excited. Amber, thank you so much for coming on. We're excited to have you on the podcast. It's been a while. We met kind of, I guess, a few years ago, just in the circle of business owner resources and expertise. But I want to start just by having you introduce yourself in your own words and tell us a little bit about what chapter you're in and really what drew you into the next phase of where you are post transition out of your business.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, especially, after exiting, to still kind of be in the business world and be able to share some of this expertise when I'm kind of in a liminal space right now. So I started a virtual assistant agency connecting US-based freelance admin assistants with small business owners. And I started that in 2015 and just sold the company in March to my COO and her husband, who is now the new CEO. And I am fully exited from the company really quickly because I had, I guess, practiced what I preach in terms of preparing for that and delegating along the way to be able to actually fully step out. And it, of course, made a huge difference to sell to someone that was already working in the business. The team knew it, just, made things a lot different. But I'll say, right now, I don't have a really clear structure around like, who is Amber Gray? What is Amber doing? And I'm just really following my heart. I'm following the things that I know that I'm uniquely gifted to do. And that's honestly what my message in my book and online, all the different places I'm talking is just really about helping people learn to live a life that is, I use this mantra called less hustle, more flow. And really, that's what it's about. It's not about saying like, well, we don't want to hustle. We just want everything to be easy. No, there's a time and place for that, but it's not the state that we need to stay in. So I'm really passionate about trying to help people create the margin, the space to be able to get into that flow state, to be able to feel like life is a little bit easier while still having really big goals for their lives and for their businesses. So really kind of hard to define, but that's kind of where I am now, where I'm just really seeing what wants to come out in terms of helping people around those topics.
I love this whole methodology and mindset of the less hustle. I think, especially as entrepreneurs, as leaders, we think, oh, we got to hustle more, we got to hustle more. And we run into that a lot with our clients in the marketing world. And so one of the processes that we go through when we're looking at tasks and thinking about delegation is, okay, where are you going to lean, hustle, and adapt? Those are kind of these three areas. And our inclination is to like hustle everything. But the reality is you can't. In order to do everything you want to do, you literally can't hustle. And so we really try and come up with on the marketing side, like you have to have more leaning into the experts, leaning into people, people like yourself to help you get over the mental block, or back when you were with Trusty Oak, get the delegation into place, like leaning into others, because you can't hustle into the business you really want. So I'm so stoked. I haven't read your book yet, so I'm very excited that I have my copy and to dive into more to that. But you spent what, 10 years building Trusty Oak? That was kind of the beginning to the end of the journey?
Yes.
Okay. What was the moment or even realization that made you feel that you're ready to step away and fire yourself from that CEO role? Because I feel like that's a hard thing to transition into, to saying you want to do it and actually doing it are two different things. So what was that moment like?
Yeah, absolutely. honestly, it was not just a moment, it was a season is probably a better way to put it, because I would say that it was about 15 months of, but from the time that I recognized, okay, something has to change. I think what I need to thrive and what Trusty Oak needs to thrive have diverged. And Trusty Oak is still something I care deeply about, and especially the community that I built within Trusty Oak. So the freelancers that are working with Trusty Oak, the team, obviously the clients. There's hundreds of people that are kind of impacted by that ecosystem. So it wasn't something that I just wanted to, get away from as quick as possible. I really wanted to be able to hand it off with intention. And that, I guess, first realization was so long ago. And honestly, the time between actually getting the deal closed and that decision was extremely challenging, because for a little bit of it, I hadn't actually mentioned to my team, hey, I'm making this decision to sell the business. Also, I was working through, different offers for the business along the way, feeling like, hey, that doesn't really align. I feel like I'm selling my soul if I go the private equity route. Because I was talking to a lot of different types of potential buyers, and it was an absolute roller coaster, to be honest, because I felt like, I guess, going back, kind of getting back to your point about like why, like what was the catalyst for all of that. And it really was about feeling, like I said, the thriving, but burning out. Like I did burn out at some point. It was really more about 2022, but the aftermath of experiencing that, and really being able to continue in a growth focused mentality while also recovering from burnout is a really challenging place to live. And so honestly, I was just holding on. I was holding steady. My business was not growing. I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I knew I should be doing if I wanted to grow. And I was just trying to survive, honestly, and just get through it and get to that point where I found the right person that did have the level of energy needed to carry on the vision that I had created. So it really was about I guess, an individual need. My personal needs were going a different direction. And this mantra of less hustle, more flow was really a big part of it, where I was recognizing my business right now needs that hustle mentality, and where I am physically and mentally and emotionally is not quite in that state right now. And so I just, that was really everything about it, was just, I've got to take care of myself. Yes, I've sacrificed a lot to be a business owner. We always do. But it's time to sort of flip that script a little bit and start focusing on what really lights me up inside, which Trusty Oak did for a long time, but it kind of hits a point where I'm realizing, okay, I've grown, I've changed. Where I need to focus is also changing. And so I really had to just step into with faith into that next chapter without actually knowing what the next actually looks like.
It sounds like it had to have been a big part of your journey into your new book. I mean, so your new book, Firing Yourself, right?
Yeah.
It really seems like it talks to those high achievers that struggle with letting go, and from your experience, your expertise. And so what do you think why do you think delegation is such a huge challenge for leaders, for visionary owners, visionary CEOs?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that because CEOs and business, people starting businesses are high achievers, and it's like, it's one of those things where we're our own worst enemy. And we want to do so many big things, and we find it really hard to invite help for those things. We have a vision, and we want to make sure it's executed exactly like we're imagining it, and we don't give a lot of grace for mistakes and things like that. So we hang on to things because we think we are the best person to do those things. And it's just not, we need help if we're going to build something bigger than ourselves. And I think that we just get in our own way in that sense. We're just like, okay, let's go. But like we said earlier, it's not a state you can stay in consistently. So I think that's why we struggle with delegation, because we really want this thing to go exactly like we're imagining, and we don't always feel open to inviting other people's input into that. It can be a process of really learning to let go in that sense.
What's something that you would say, I feel like one of the biggest excuses I hear, or even that I experience, is like, oh, well, if I'm going to do it, if somebody's not going to do it right or how I want it, like it takes more time because I have to go back and fix it. And so there's a little bit of an element, maybe that's true if you have the wrong person, right? But let's say you have the right team. I feel like, how do you manage the expectation of, okay, there's not going to be perfection in
Hmm.
my person that I'm delegating to do things exactly how I want. And the reality is, I know I've experienced sometimes that's better because
Hmm.
I'm not great at everything. That's why
That's
I'm
right.
delegating. But is there some sort of process or mindset that you've been able to discover or encourage people to manage that expectation, to prepare for the errors or the learning curve versus just, the product or the task comes back and it's not right? What does that look like in your journey, and kind of how you've overcome that with clients or even yourself?
Well, I talk about this in the book and use a variation of the 80-20 rule. If you're familiar with 80-20,
Sure.
it's like our efforts. How I can't remember exactly how that Pareto principle is stated, but essentially, with the way I use it in delegation is that you can expect somebody to do 80% of the work. Like 80% as good as you. Just set your expectation to 80% instead of 100%. If you want to think of the actual delegation process, you start with the first 10%. You're gonna go 10% into this project, enough to be able to explain it really well to someone else so that they know what your expectations are. And then they're gonna take that next 80% and they're gonna give it back to you. So now we're at 90%, and it's still your job to polish it out, to finish what needs to be done to get it to 100 as the leader. So if you can delegate 80% of your task in that method, you're going to have a lot of margin to do things that are, your highest contribution, your unique gifts.
That's such a huge and simple way, I feel like, to overcome that. Like this idea of like, yeah, you're gonna have to do some at the beginning, you're gonna do some at the end, close it out, and that's part of it. That's what you should expect versus
Exactly.
it just being a line in the sand. That really makes sense. So one of the things that is, I know you do a lot of tools and resources, the delegation matrix and the decision making grid. Tell us a little bit about those tools and how they help leaders kind of reclaim that time and focus. I feel
Yeah.
like reclaiming time is something that we are constantly fighting for.
Yes, we are. Well, the delegation matrix is not something that I created. It's an adaptation from the Eisenhower matrix. The Eisenhower had a method where when he deciding what task to put his attention to, it's a cross section of like how urgent is it and how important is it. And so you can use this worksheet for delegation to decide, like, is this something that I'm supposed to do based on it being urgent and important, or is it something that you need to delegate based on, if it's something that can wait. It's easier when you're actually looking at the worksheet to understand exactly where everything goes. But essentially, that tool is a way to determine what to delegate, because what I've learned over the years is that usually people get stalled out before they ever start. They're back to the earlier comment about, like, it's hard to let go. Sometimes it's just a mental decision of, like, I'm decision fatigue. I don't know which task to hand off. Is it okay for me to give this one off, or should I do that myself? There's a lot of questions around that. So the matrix is a tool to help you decide what task to delegate. And then the delegation decision making grid is using the 5 levels of delegation, which is something that I came across in Harvard Business Review. And it's essentially different levels of autonomy. So level 1 is like no autonomy, follow this SOP, do this exactly like I've asked you to do. And then there's obviously the in between, with level 5 being complete autonomy, do the thing, don't even tell me about it. And so the thing that this tool comes in so handy for is that you can use the level of expertise that the person you're delegating to has. So a virtual assistant, for example, you're going to evaluate what's their level of expertise in this task that I want to delegate, and how much risk is associated with this task if it's done incorrectly. And so based on that, you can choose which level of delegation, how much autonomy should I be giving this person when I delegate the task? So it's kind of like the training wheels before you're able to do this, just in flow the way you're thinking. Like if you need something to look at, like, okay, how should I hand this off? Like as an example, let's say you want to delegate, you need blog content on your website for the next 3 months because you have a huge speaking event at the end of 3 months, and okay, I've got to get ready for the speaking event, but there are a lot of pieces in between now and then. Everything
Right.
from like building the audience online, making sure that everything looks good. So whenever you do have that big moment, you're pointing people back to some good stuff. You can delegate those pieces way in advance. So 3 months out, you're going, okay, I know I need to have this. So this is the thing I'm going to delegate, getting this content. And you have time to actually walk through, get feedback, give feedback, like really hone in on that. So at the 3 month mark, you've got it all together and you're ready for that big event. So the decision grid helps with essentially just knowing how to communicate what level of autonomy you want. Because some people, it's like, hey, take care of this. People interpret what that means differently.
Right.
So this helps you kind of create a shared language around what do I mean by take care of this? And that could be, write the blog and publish it, or it could be write a draft, let me look at it, I'll give you feedback, then we'll publish. There's different steps we can break it down into.
So if somebody wanted to learn more about those resources or tools, where would they go? What would they do?
amberlgray.com. So I've got actually the page that has my book featured. It's amberlgray.com/book. There are tons of these delegation resources that are available for free. You don't even have to give me your email. You can just go click and download. So that's really the best place to get into that. And I've actually developed a chat GPT, a custom GPT that is focused on helping you delegate. And you can just go say like, hey, I'm overwhelmed. Help me parse out like what I should be delegating. You can upload a screenshot of your calendar and your to-do list, and it'll help you break it down on what's delegatable and what you should be focusing on.
Very cool. Okay, that's exciting. That sounds like a little bit of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. if you're into ChatGPT, some people might be like, I don't think so.
Yeah,
but,
I know. There's a mixed reviews.
Sure.
I, for one, enjoy it and have fun with it, especially when there's something that's so intentionally created like that.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, a lot of times I know founders, executives, they really have a hard time figuring out how to grow without losing control, right? Especially if you are a micromanager or it's your baby, you've created this team or this business. So, what would you say you would prioritize as the mindset shift that they have to make in order to be able to delegate effectively? So before they even can jump into these tools, what is that thought process that has to start happening?
Yeah. Well, the title "Firing Yourself," I actually started this book well before I thought I was going to sell the business. So I'm bringing this up because the reason why firing yourself came into play is because we all know that or have stories of an employee that's underperforming. And we know that the answer, if they're underperforming, they're not accomplishing what we need to, then we have to make the hard decision and let them go. They're holding everyone else back. It's the same situation with us as the CEOs. We've got to shift into the mindset of recognizing like, hey, we are probably the problem. It's like, most of the time it really is something that we can fix. We're the problem if delegation is failing. Even if, like you said, you've got the right people on the team, but delegation continues to fail, the common denominator is the leader. So yeah. We've got to first acknowledge that delegation skills can be improved and we're probably the problem. So that's probably the biggest one, is just to recognize like, I can fix this, I can get better, turn inward, look at it from that perspective, and recognize that if you don't, you're holding the entire team back, you're holding that growth back. So letting go is how you grow.
That makes so much sense. I feel like that really resonates with part of the journey that Heather and I recently were on, where, we realized our gap. We were really looking for like a sales sidekick to come in and kind of help with some of the administrative side and like the initial side of things. And it truly came from we're the problem, we're the roadblock. And so now how can we find this person? And as a part of that journey, we totally put together a whole snapshot of like, here's how we're the problem. We are looking for people to help hold us accountable, to allow ourselves to get out of the way, and
Good.
really empowering our team. And so we kind of went down that path, not only with our current team, but with the new onboarding, and had them talk to our current team to be like, oh yeah, this is how they're the problem, and just making it a part of the conversation of, we all have, skills, we all have these weaknesses where we don't need to be focusing. And we've really leaned into Working Genius. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's like, oh, you got to read it. We're really into it. It's like this idea of a project from beginning to end. There's different skill sets that you need to get there, and basically you can't be all of them. So like, I'm very like ideation, that's one of my strengths, but like closing it out, I can do it, but like that is not my strength. I need someone else to come in. So we've really leaned into a lot of that too with our team, which has helped us to kind of say, okay, we're going to take this off because you are legitimately better at it than we are. So it's been a journey.
Honestly, I feel like that's a marketer's strength, being able to name the problem, like like it's a really insightful way to start. It's like, let's identify the problem and then we can figure out the solution. That's great.
Absolutely. It's part of the natural process.
Yeah.
Okay, so now where you're at, I know you're in this really cool journey post exit onto this next phase. You've written a book and you're helping others potentially move from the over functioning to really figuring out what matters most. And so you've talked about unhurried living. And what does that look like? What does it look like in your own life? How do you practice that? And how would you encourage other people to start practicing that in their own
Yeah.
life?
Well, one of the first things I'll say, a very practical thing you can do, is look at your phone and turn off most of your notifications. Because the thing about living unhurried is that you've got to stop multitasking, and we have to recognize how much time we're losing to task switching and being distracted. Our phone is a distraction. It's an addiction. I think we all at this point have learned, okay, yeah, we're addicted to our phones, no matter who we are. So figuring out how you can reduce the number of people that have access to your brain at any given time. Like, I don't even have notifications on at all, which is kind of like, some people are like, how do you know what's going on? I decide when I'm going to go check my phone, when I'm going to respond to text messages, and I do it in blocked time frames. So unhurried living for me has been about planning my day in these focused blocks where I have deep work time. I always say, in fact, this is in the book too, like, I think leaders need more thinking time. That is part of our job, is to be able to think, to be able to like let the ideas float around, like let our creativity flow. And we don't get to do that enough if we're in the weeds and bogged down and we're rushing from one thing to the other. I don't have kids, but I always like the analogy of like, you got to drop the kids off. I always hear, all my friends are like, well, I can't do this because they're running around and everything feels really crazy. And it is not feeling very unhurried. Everything feels like a rush. You're running from one thing to the other all the time. Dinner, all the basic things that you need to do to take care of yourself. And it's about focusing on fewer things and recognizing that you're actually going to have a better output by focusing on fewer things in deep, intentional ways, instead of this back and forth, like always, like constantly task switching, because you are losing much more time than you realize to task switching. And so the more you can reduce that, that's the first step into unhurried living. And I think there's a lot more I could talk about in that sense, just with, I do Qigong, which is like an ancient Chinese practice that has like gentle breath work, or gentle movements and breath work, and things to like regulate my nervous system, meditation. Like, I'm doing a lot of these things, not to get all woo woo and all that stuff, but to really feel good, like to feel focused. Even before this podcast, I've spent a little time with my eyes closed, shaking my body energy out a little bit. And those kinds of things really make a huge difference so that I can show up and be fully present, not distracted. And I'll say one last thing about this, and that's being interruptible, because there's so many times that you might miss a moment to be uh, to create an impact in someone else's life because you're going so fast. But if you have a little space, somebody can come up and ask you a question and you're able to give them the thing that they needed to hear. This happened one time whenever I was just sitting outside and a neighbor came by and started chatting with me. And through the conversation, I realized this person is actually feeling a little suicidal. So really serious stuff. And if I had been like too busy to stop and talk to this person and show them kindness and hear them, like who knows, you just don't know. So every moment matters. And if you can just be available for the things that you're not expecting, you can really have some special moments in your life, I think.
I think that's such a profound and simple, it's more difficult, but it sounds simple, right? Like just being interruptible. It's such a good goal and such a good anchor to move towards. I love that. I I'm definitely gonna have to take that one with me because that is one that is really motivating and encouraging, especially, sometimes it's easier to be motivated when you're thinking about how it's going to impact things externally than it is how you're impacting things internally. And so that feels like this idea of being available, wanting to be available for your team, your family, your community. So doing unhurried living, the action so that you can be interruptible, that's powerful. And I could see how not only is it life changing for personally, but totally changes how you approach your business.
Yeah, and you feel more connected to your purpose whenever there's room for these things to happen. That's not in your strategic plan.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, my final question, we're all about vision over here. Like everything we do, we start with vision. The strategies we put together, we always say, like, you don't need more leads. You don't need more of these tactics. You need to figure out exactly what is the strategy that's going to get you to your end game and get you to your vision. So, how did your vision shape the way you built Trusty Oak and the decision to eventually step away from it? I know you talked a lot about burnout, but what was that vision as far as like guiding you and bringing you to that next step?
Yeah. Well, I think it was, I mean, I started Trusty Oak because I could see people struggling to get things done on their own, like, really amazing people with big visions doing things, but they just didn't have the time. So it was a little bit of like, oh, I see a problem that I think I can fix. I have the skills to fix, and I know a lot of other people do too. So I'll just start bringing those people like me together to help those other people that need it. So it really was about just identifying the problem. But it's evolved a lot, obviously, with exiting the business now. And the vision really has been about just helping myself well, I needed a job. So I started a company, and I had skill sets. So it really has been, I guess, self-centered in that sense, where part of it is like, okay, I need to solve this problem for myself. But now it's evolved to like really thinking about how can I help people that are me 10 years ago, for
Yeah.
example. It's like thinking of my younger self. That's the person I know I can help the most because I've been through whatever, that version of me has experienced a lot. And so just being able um, to, to help those people that are in the place I was before. And yeah, just see where we end up.
It sounds like you really value the side of like impact, like creating an impact in other people's
Yes.
life and kind of owners and how they're navigating forward and being able to use your skills, your expertise to do that. So that absolutely makes sense why it would be such a guiding source.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we could sit here and talk so much more because you are just full of a wealth of knowledge, but also really exciting things. So, for listeners who want to learn more about firing yourself, get the book in their hands, or digital too, if they don't want it tangibly in their hands, or even explore working with you, where's the best place for them to start?
Yeah, my website, Amber L. Gray, that's my middle initial, .com. So that's the best place to see everything I have going on. I've got a weekly newsletter where I'm sharing all things from delegation to training your focus to using creative outlets like art to regulate ourselves, but also to uh, inspire ourselves and to use it like to get back to innovation and imagination, because as business owners we do need our creativity, and again, if we're going too fast we don't really have as much space for that. And so I think there's a place for some of that stuff we might think of leisure, but I think it's actually soul work, and I want to help people do that. So amberlgray.com for the book, for the blogs. I also have a delegation course that's pretty easy to get through. You could think of it as a companion to the book. But yeah, lots of resources related to delegation over there.
Very exciting. Well, I am excited to jump over there myself, dive into the book, and I'll look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thanks so much, Amber, for coming on and chatting with us.
Awesome. Thank you. Good to be here.